Hello, friends, an hour of power guests. This is our read aloud this week. It's called Emily's Snowball, the world's biggest. And it is a story by Elizabeth Cohen and it's illustrated by Irene Trevas. Look at that picture. That is a giant snowball. I want for you to think about our 5-finger summary. Okay, so I want you to think about the setting of the story. When and where does it take place? Who are the characters and what happens in the beginning, middle, and end of this story? We're going to go over that at the end. See if you're able to help do this with us. Emily's Snowball, the world's biggest. There's the title page. When Emily looked out the window, big flakes of snow were falling, and they had started to cover the ground. "I want to make a snowball," she said. Soon Emily was outside in her backyard. She took some snow in her hands and patted it together. She rolled it on the ground and she made a snowball. Since Emily was a little girl, she made a little snowball, but she was proud of it. When it was time to come inside, she wanted to bring the snowball in the house and play with it, but her mother had her leave it on the back porch near the door. Not a good idea to bring a snowball in the house. What's going to happen if you bring a snowball in the house? By the next morning, there was so much snow that all schools were closed. Emily and her older brother and sister hurried out to play. They found the little snowball just as Emily had left it. Emily took the little snowball with her. "Let's make it bigger," suggested her sister, and helped the other children pack big handfuls of snow around it. Oh my goodness, look how big it's growing. Then the children started pushing and rolling it. Over and over the snowball rolled, picking up more and more snow and growing bigger and bigger. The snowball became too big and too heavy for Emily and her brother and sister to roll, and the other boys and girls from the neighborhood helped them. When they finished, Emily's snowball was big. It was as big as all of the children put together. That night, more snow fell. Kind of feels like what's happening outside at our house or in our neighborhood. The next day, everyone had to stay home. Emily and her father went outside to see the snowball, and some of the men in the neighborhood came over. "Whose snowball is this?" asked one of the men. "It's mine," said Emily. "It's a big one," he said. "But why don't we make it bigger?" Soon Emily and her father and the neighbors were working on the snowball, pushing it and rolling it. Over and over the snowball rolled, picking up more and more snow and growing bigger and bigger. They pushed the snowball from one yard to another, down the street to the end of the block. "This snowball is as big and heavy as a tow truck," said Emily's father. It was too big for anyone's yard, so Emily and her father and the neighbors rolled it across the street to the park and left it on the top of a high hill. "Look at how big that snowball is." Wonder how big of a snowball you could make. But the snowball didn't stay there. It kept going. It started down the hill. Over and over the snowball rolled, faster and faster, picking up more and more snow and growing bigger and bigger, and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Finally, at the bottom of the hill, it stopped rolling. Emily's snowball was enormous. Enormous is a fancy word for huge. It was as big as an elephant. By the next day, the snow had stopped falling. Emily and her mother went to the park. A big truck was clearing the road, but it had stopped because right in front of it, in the middle of the road, was Emily's snowball. The driver got out to take a look. "I wonder whose snowball this could be," he remarked. "It's mine," said Emily. "You sure have a big one, little girl," the man said. "And it has to move. It's blocking everything." The driver got back in his truck. "Climb in," he said to Emily and her mother, "and we'll get this snowball out of the way." Emily and her mother got into the truck, and the driver started it again. Then, with the help of the other men who were working in the park carefully, very carefully, he pushed the snowball out of the road and rolled it down a long, low hill. What do you think's going to happen to the snowball? Over and over the snowball rolled, picking up more and more snow and growing bigger and bigger. The driver left the snowball near the children's playground. Then he looked at it again. "This snowball," he said, "is huge. It's as big as a mountain." People from everywhere came to see the snowball. They all said it was as big as a mountain. Everybody said it was the biggest snowball they'd ever seen, and everyone thought it had to be the world's biggest. Teachers and scientists from the university came to study the snowball and to measure it. They found that it really was the world's biggest, and they put up a sign, "Emily's Snowball, the world's biggest." There were stories about the snowball in newspapers and in books, and there were pictures of Emily and her snowball on television. All winter long, the snowball stayed in the park, big as a mountain. Children wanted to climb it, so the city put a rope ladder on the snowball, up one side and down the other, and then a platform with a railing was placed on top, and the children could stand there and look all around. Emily and her brother and sister came to the park every day to see the snowball and to climb it. Everyone loved it. Oh my goodness, they've made a whole carnival. Finally, the weather started to get warm. The snow melted from the ground, but Emily's snowball stayed as big as a mountain. The sun grew warmer. Birds began to sing in the park. Slowly, the snowball started melting and turning to water. Emily's snowball was no longer as big as a mountain. Flowers began to bloom. School children played baseball in the park. Emily played in the sandbox. The weather became warmer and warmer, and the snowball melted more and more. And Emily's snowball, it wasn't as big as a mountain or an elephant or a tow truck or any of the children. Can you still see it? Look carefully at the picture. It wasn't even as big as a little ball. One day when Emily went to the park, all that was left of her snowball was a puddle of water. Emily put one foot and then the other into the puddle and splashed the water from her snowball into the bright sunshine. She splashed again and again and again until all the water was gone. But the sign was still there, and everyone remembered Emily's snowball, the world's biggest. And there's the end. I have a challenge for you. How big of a snowball can you make? Let's see. Okay, so I want for you to see how big of a snowball you can make. You can get some friends to help you. And then see if you can find a measuring tape or something to measure it and take a photo and send it to us. That would be so exciting. So you can send it. I'm going to put in the Hour of Power, I'm going to put my email address. I want you to send me a picture of your world's biggest snowball and you in it measuring it, and we'll see how many pictures we can get to put in our photo gallery for Hour of Power. Also, I want to tell you that there is a secret code this week hidden in Lettertown. Go looking for that secret code. Okay, so let's remember our 5-finger summary. First of all, what was the setting? Okay, so it was at Emily's house first, and then it was in her yard, okay, and then it was at the park, and then at the playground. Oh, it was in the road too, don't forget that. So several different settings for this story. Who were the characters? There was Emily and her family, the tow truck driver, her dad and other neighborhood men from the town, and then the whole town was in the story. What happened at the beginning? Emily started to build her snowball and her mom wouldn't let her take it in the house. Remember, she had to leave it outside. And then other people started to help build the snowball and make it bigger and bigger and bigger. And then the tow truck came and had to move it out of the road and moved it into the park. And Emily and her mom got to ride in the tow truck, and then they moved it. It was as big as a mountain, remember? And they moved it to a hill in the park, and then it rolled down the hill to the kids' playground, and then it rolled down another hill. And then finally, at the end of the story, do you remember what happened? It got warm, it became spring, and the snowball got smaller and smaller and smaller, and then melted until it was just a puddle. And then Emily splashed in the puddle until the water was all gone. Hey, have a great time. Look in Lettertown for the next secret code. See you next time on Hour of Power.